A couple of days ago, we woke up to a tweet of Donald Trump coming to rescue Nigerian Christians. What if I told you Nigeria's so-called religious conflict? It might not really be about religion. What if I told you it could be about power, gold, and global politics? Everyone blames religion, but the real story behind Nigeria's northern conflict will shock you. The roots of what we call Christian-Muslim conflict in Nigeria, northern Nigeria, goes far beyond religion. They are tied to pre-colonial power structures, colonial manipulation, post-colonial politics. Yes, I know you want to shout, hey, it's equal. Wait, I will explain now. That's why I'm making this video. The president of a sovereign nation, the United States, Donald Trump, tweeted twice. Confusion set loose around Nigeria, around the world, diasporas, everybody, especially in Nigeria. Nigeria is also the sovereign nation. The story that Donald Trump, has declared his state of emergency did not start today. Let's take a ride back to the 11th century. The pre-colonial era. Yes, I know some of you have started shouting, what does this have to do with colonialism? Wait now, stay with me. This is why I've always said, if you do not understand human history, I'm not even talking about a pre-colonial history, yesterday history, you might end up raging for a foolish cause. Pre-colonial era with Islamic expansion. Islam entered the space we now know as northern Nigeria around the 11th through trans-Saharan trade routes from North Africa. By the early 19th century, Islam has become deeply established, especially after Usman Dan Fodio's Sokoto Jihad 1804 to 1808. Mind you, there was no Nigeria yet. The jihad aimed to reform Islam and establish a theocratic state, the Sokoto Caliphate, which unified much of northern Nigeria under Islamic rule. This was not merely a religious movement, but also a political revolution that replaced Hausa rulers and Fulani emirs. See, religion and politics always working side by side since the Roman era. Today, in that region now, there is an estimated of 7,000 people that have been killed. I think it's only just this year. Colonial era, divide and rule, you see. Moving very fast, stay with me. Fast forward to 20th century. When the British colonized the part of West Africa where Nigeria is today, from around the 1900s to 1960, they used indirect rule, governing through existing traditional Muslim rulers in the north. To maintain control and stability, the British restricted Christian missionary activities in the Muslim north. But because that region was already predominantly Muslim, but encouraged them in the southern middle belt area. So Muslims dominated northern politics, while Christians among the southern and middle belt ethnic group. However, these strict colonial boundaries deepened ethnic, educational, and economic division between the north and the south. And in all this, let us not forget, Christian missionary work was also used by colonial powers as a cultural influence strategy across Africa. So it is very important to note that in northern Nigeria isn't one homogeneous bloc. Now, let's move quickly to politics so that we begin to uncover why President Trump is now so in love, obsessed with saving Nigeria. After independence in 1960, Nigeria was structured in a way that religion and ethnic identity became a political power tool. Many religious conflicts in the north are really struggles over power, access to resources, and identity, with religion serving as a mobilizing symbol. Put a pin on that resources because I think we might end up going to that point. But before we continue, you need to understand how mobilizing symbols work, how religion is instrumentalized as a mobilizing symbol. Else, you will get lost in this gist. A mobilizing symbol is an idea, image, or belief that unites people emotionally and drives them to collective action, often bypassing their rational thinking. It is not just about what people believe, or it's to make them feel that thing is sacred, personal, identity defining, and then you create the order. I've talked about this in the video before, creating that order. In Nigeria, religion and ethnicity are number one mobilizing symbols because they create a sense of belonging. Mark who is us versus them, and give meaning or justification to actions, even conflict, even invasion. It is a playbook. So why are we missing this? Except you don't know history. This is a playbook. For it to psychologically work, you have to create a sense of group belonging. Remember, we are social beings as human beings. Then ignite emotions to subdue rational thinking or even talk, conversation, debate. Go ahead to simplify the complexity of the situation, which is exactly what is happening right now. This situation is so complex, but the simplified way to emotionally trigger people is Christians versus Muslims or Muslims versus Christians. It's a religious conflict. Then create a legitimacy by proclaiming yourself strongly side so that you can now all gang up to fight another side, irrespective of the root causes of what is happening. Then that kind of thing, you become like a savior. That rhetoric, to create that, you will say things like Christians are under attack, they want to destroy us. You have bonded the identity. That rhetoric is not just talking about religion. We have to be wise. Open your eye on this thing. It is an activating strategy. This playbook has been used centuries before. You are building what? Fear, loyalty, moral urgency. To seal this psychological warfare, which is what it is, you manipulate history. What if I tell you this is more than Muslims and if this is actually about something more than this, like what is beneath the ground? Kaolin, salt, various gemstones like emerald, sapphire. I'm going to explain because you cannot justify invasion, threat, internal affairs of a sovereign country by saying, that thing under your ground is very valuable. It's not going to work. So you need something to emotionally trigger support from around the world. And what will that be? You draw the connection. You think, I want to know if you're capable of like opening this playbook and seeing what is there, because there are solutions to this. So we are going to explore some of these solutions. This is going to be like about 10 to 15 videos in this series because there is more to it than what is copy and paste everywhere, what they're just telling in mainstream international relations. There is something called New World Order, right? Which refers to like a period of dramatic change in the world political thought, power distribution, and institutional arrangements. But that term, New World Order, is also widely used in some conspiracy circles to describe one secret global elite working to impose a one-world government, suppress national sovereignty, and control population, right? But well, in that sense, it is not just power shift, but a hidden structure, hidden agenda. Why am I saying this? I want us to put a pin there because this is going to allow us to address this issue deeper. There is a New World Order. Have you not seen how Chinese government companies are coming to establish themselves in Nigeria? You know that China and the US, they have their own technological race now. But put a pin there, we're going to address that either in this video or in future video, and you will see how this ties up to what is happening in Nigeria right now. So is it really religious? It is not entirely, but religion is the language, because this is about power, ethnicity, and economics. These are the substance. So can we actually start thinking deeper meets the eye? Because some critics argue that political leaders often use religious rhetoric to mobilize supporters or distract from governance failures. This is very important. There is also another factor here: governance failures. Insecurity has been going on in Nigeria, in different parts of Nigeria. What has been done? You tell me, because I want to get your take on this. So economic inequalities, youth unemployment, the historical resentment create a fertile ground for manipulation. For example, the Sharia debate in early 2000s, much about the northern autonomy and political identity as they were about faith. When international figures like Donald Trump or Western media outlets say Christians are being killed in Nigeria, they are referring to violent conflict in the Middle Belt and regions, particularly involving rural Christian farming communities and armed groups, often Fulani headsmen or Islamic insurgents. Now, so this is not the whole of Nigeria. Nigeria is about 120 million people living in dense population. So this issue here in Nigeria, it's not 220 million people. Let's be able to differentiate these issues. But is there insecurity in the country? Yes. In this series, we will unpack this carefully. Let's start with the Middle Belt. This is the epicenter of religious conflict. Plateau State, just Barkin Ladi Riyom. Allegedly, there has been frequent clashes between farming communities and Fulani Muslim herders, often described as religious, but also this is tied to land use, cattle routes, and political control. In late October, it was reported that about 31 people were killed in coordinated assaults in Barkin Ladi and Riyom local government within a single week. Now let's go to Benue State, predominantly Christian and Tiv-speaking communities. Look, one thing I even remember now, even looking at the statistics, I'm going to tell you some of the statistics. We're always talking about Christians, Muslims, Christians. Please, there are a large number of people that do not belong to these two groups. They are still affected. Nobody's coming to save them. So please, let us start looking at this as one people, if possible. There have been reports of armed herders with many fatalities over the years, also as religious conflict, which it really isn't. Now, Southern Kaduna State. This is a mixed zone. Northern Kaduna has more Muslim majority, Southern has more Christian majority. Now, there has been allegedly clashes between Adara or groups and Fulani, Taraba or Nasarawa State. There has been similar patterns of between Christian farmers and Fulani herders. Now put a pin in this economic aspect, farming and herders. That's where the real issue actually lies. Both are strong land. Beyond both of them, because under that land, and through the root of that land, you are going to go into other drink countries. There are very important things there. Do you know who else might be behind that land? You guess. I mean, in Io that looks into that land that wants that thing there. And you know one thing I've realized when I've been looking at all the live panels talking about all of these, or the YouTube panels talking about all of this, many young Nigerians do not know how great they are. The land upon which they tread, they live, they do not know what is underneath that land. You are just ignoring that. But that's going to be part of the solution. This is one of the problems. Now let's go to northern East Nigeria, Borno, Yobe, Adamawa State. This region is where Boko Haram and later Islamic State Africa province operate. These groups have targeted both Christians and Muslims. Remember girls in 2014, yes, that drew global attention. So when President Trump referenced Christians being killed, this was what he's reacting to. The terror attacks framed in religious terms. These incidents were heavily covered by Christian advocacy groups and US evangelical networks, often framing them solely as religious persecution. According to an article published on a Christian information outlet last August, the Observatory of Religious Freedom in Africa released a 4-year data project documenting 55,910 fatalities from 9,970 attacks. Now we're looking at some statistics because we're going to really break this report down in future episodes and understand what is in there. So including both civilians and combatants across Nigeria. Out of these 50,000 something, 30,880 were civilians that were killed. So now me, I'm asking, what about the remaining 25,030 are non-civilians? In these 30,880, Christians totaled 16,769, significantly outnumbering the 6,235 Muslim fatalities. So this is how it was stated in that article. So what does that mean? I'm asking myself now, does it mean that 111 civilians are neither Christians or Muslims, which then means if you add the non-civilians, 20,346. So how is it then a religious conflict? In this same article, it was said that Fulani radicals are responsible for more than half of the Christian deaths, meaning from that 16,769, who is now responsible for the other deaths? We would look deeper into this matter, into these numbers. Although it really pains me and saddens me because people's like, be you Christian or not Christian or traditionalist or whoever, civilian combat, all these ones are labels that you carry upon yourself. It really pains me that this is now reduced to numbers where you even have the last number 30,000 and something and something. It's a shame. Now, but we're going to dissect this report. We're going to take our time, read this report. So in future episodes, we're going to really bring out what we find in this report. So stay with me here. So while religion is part of identity, the core causes of this conflict are land pressure from climate change, herders, farmers dispute, ethnic power struggle, weak governance. This issue shows how religion overlaps. We have an issue with security in Nigeria. So yes, there are areas where Christians are being killed. Nobody is denying this, but it is not single organized religious warfare. It is a complex mix of terrorism. Let us be calling it what it is. Terrorism. There's rural violence, ethnic rivalry, and weak state protection. Because when we keep making it a religious war, we are actually giving the government an excuse. But why is the president of a world's leading nation currently extra interested in the domestic issues of another sovereign nation? That is the part that baffles me the most. And I think this is the part we should also lay emphasis and focus on. Isn't it baffling? Is it because of the viral cry for help by a Nigerian pastor who spoke out? One must understand his pain. If you see that video, you will understand his pain, his anger. His own country has, especially if you're in the midst of that violence, right? So his cry for help to the Nigerian government, he doesn't feel hurt because this thing probably has been happening in his community and he has witnessed it and it's still happening. So that's why he's trying to cry out now to an external government. We should not forget that we are the ones responsible for our society. So as I've briefly analyzed this report, which is actually online, you can go read it, but we're going to analyze it in future content. Religion is not the root cause of this violence. Religion is the emotional trigger to mobilize you because at least it provides foreign government a reason to justify their interference, which in turn brings it to the correct of the Nigerian government. So beside this, there is something else cooking, irrespective of religious affiliations. Let me explain something about the of the world's legal framing. There is this principle of sovereign equality. That's UN Charter Article, I think, 2.1. All states are legally equal in rights, duties under the international law. Sovereignty means the supreme authority of a state over its territory and domestic affairs, free from external control. So the United States, therefore, has no legal superiority that permits it to dictate internal governance or policy in Nigeria. So is the US intent to actually help something else in play? What do you think? Because the conflict zone of northern and middle belt Nigeria, often labeled as Muslim Christian or herder farmer conflict, also happen to be the seat for strategic minerals and energy resources. So we are talking about oil, gold, uranium, lithium, tin, columbite, iron ore, coal, gemstones, all of which have immense global economic and technological importance. It mirrors long-standing resource conflict seen in other parts of Africa, Central Africa, such as the DRC. So this is not over. We are at the top of this matter for you. And there are clear solutions to conflict if there is political will. I will share some of these solutions within this series. So stay tuned for follow-up content. Know your history so that history does not do you shake. I am Chuadre. And we just got started uncovering untold African experiences.